My name's Paul.
This is Ryan.
Today we're talking about the Whispering Cairn.
We are. So this is a third edition or 3.5 edition. Whatever. I'm lumping them all together. Adventure. It was originally published in 2005 in Dungeon Magazine 124. Mm-hmm. And it is by Erik Mona. If you are interested in getting this adventure or any of the other adventures that you can find in Dungeon Magazine, all of the PDFs and some of the hard copies, I still think for some of them, are available at the Paizo website. So you can go there and get them. They're awesome. Mm-hmm. It's a shame that they don't make them anymore. So this adventure is actually the first adventure in an ongoing adventure path. It's I think it's the second adventure path that the Paizo people ever put together. But it is an excellent standalone adventure, and it's really straightforward, right? The mm-hmm. players decide to explore an ancient tomb. And from there, they end up getting basically strong-armed by a ghost to go lay his bones to rest, get into a bar fight, and then fight a necromancer. You know, standard sort of day in the life of an adventurer.
The end.
The end. All right, thanks for listening. That was the Imp and the Ogre. But seriously, so let's talk about in general. So in general, at first blush, what'd you think?
Good. I liked that the dungeon wasn't just full of stuff. It's more like anthropologic. You know, you're going to investigate something that's not really of this era, I guess. You know, it's mysterious. There's reasons for going there, and it's not just full of monsters that you run through. There's traps and, you know, mechanics to get through, but you're going there not just to kill things.
Well, that's actually a good point on the otherworldliness of it. The fact that it's very much of a different culture, mm-hmm. and it should be strange mm-hmm. and unusual. And I think that's actually a really good point to make. A lot of dungeons that are structured are just sort of like, and there's you know, stone catacombs beneath this structure for no reason, and this is very much for all intents and purposes, an alien culture's burial room.
Especially alien to the people that live in the area, or to you people as new adventurers, as your PCs or whatever it is.
Well, it's extraplanar.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
From literally millennia ago.
Yeah.
Like it's a super ancient elemental tomb, effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The latter half of the adventure I thought was good. Some kind of generic go do this and then there's a thing there, and then fight at the bar or talk at the bar. I thought the alchemist was kind of neat.
Very interesting location, the necromancer guy. Yeah. No, there's a lot of cool thematic stuff in here. Some of the things, especially the later half, are mostly built in to help lead the party into the next adventure, because this is, you know, part one of an ongoing adventure path.
Yep.
So some of that is there for that reason. Like, they're not really necessary. But to be honest, I kind of, if it's padding, I like the way they did the padding. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't just add more to the dungeon.
It's not like obtuse. They're just not throwing things in there to do. Like, they're brief, they're quick. It's not like this long drawn out, gonna take you forever to do kind of thing.
And it makes sense, right? There's no aspect of it you're just like, really? Why? Okay, I guess we'll do this next. Like, it's a nice logical progression that helps with world building and tying the party to.
There's also a bit of
stuff.
Like, I mean, we'll get to it later, but a bit of morality involved later on by grave robbers, right?
Yeah.
Like you get to this part where they're digging up graves and they don't like doing it. And it's a good natural segue and progression, and that, it goes, I guess, starting off to kind of the town that they describe this town as being a town of desperation and seediness, but there's a bit of morality and humanity in these people that are, grasping at straws too.
So yeah, it's set in and around a mining community called Diamond Lake. Very power, hard scrabble mining community. The whole adventure originally set in the Greyhawk campaign setting, if you're familiar with it. So, but you can basically put it wherever you want. It doesn't really matter. There's just some things you'd have to change that are setting specific. If you're thinking about deities and whatnot, are all built around the Greyhawk setting. So you'd have to tweak it to whatever one you're particularly using. What's actually kind of nice is if you get the magazine, there's a whole chunk on Diamond Lake. There's literally tons, right? So way more than it's reasonable, to be honest. Like I thought there was entirely too much stuff there from a practical standpoint, but in terms of like, if you ever need a small mining town that has rival mines and mine managers and all of that type of stuff, they provide you with a whole heap of information.
I thought this town was like a great town if your heroes didn't really want to be heroes. Like if they didn't want to do just good all of the time. Like this is a good like seedy underbelly type. Could exploit locals because they're desperate, and thought that like.
Well, I agree. And what the adventure assumes is that all of the players are locals.
Yeah, that you grew up there.
Right, that you are looking at adventuring as a means of making a buck because of X, Y, and Z, because you're not doing so well. And that's partly why so much information is provided, because it would allow for the players to make characters that are really well tied, or for the DM to help the characters tie them to the area, to explain how you can be a ranger or a druid or a wizard or whatever,
sure, and
still be
part of
a poor mining community. You know what I mean? Which is kind of cool. So like the basic, actually, before I get into the hooks here, I just want to say a couple more things about Diamond Lake. So the materials provide ridiculous.
It's like half the magazine just about.
Oh yeah, but like all the locations, all the NPCs, the run it, interesting things about like the gambling hall. Like there's tons of really, really cool resources there. I mean, I think they even give you advice to help what races fit best, and if you're like how you're treated in town based off of your race and class and whatnot. So it's really well done. Like it's an appallingly large amount of preparation.
I wonder if the person that wrote this was an anthropologist.
I don't know. I put a lot of cool stuff into it. So there's lots of resources available in the magazine if you want to use the town. And if you just need a town, oh my God, it has everything you'd ever need to run your own. Okay, so the basic idea for starting the adventure off is that there are not even a rival, you're not even adventurers yet, but there's a group of adventurers that have come to town to explore the cairns that are found around in the surrounding area.
Yes.
So they come from the big city. They're all shiny and fancy, and they are off exploring tombs and what have you, looking for the loots. The locals all are kind of laughing behind their hands at them because they know that the explorers or adventurers are going to explore like empty tombs that everybody knows is empty. They've been looted for forever and forever. But the locals also know of this other tomb that hasn't been explored, and it's sort of a local legend because it's where the local teenagers dare each other to camp out overnight.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the suggestions that it makes, is that you're playing teenagers that get dared to go in,
which is kind of a cute idea for starting it. I did like that there was super like random pointless information in it. Like, this isn't done anymore because the last girl who went out there disappeared because she got eaten by a snake, apparently. Like they tell you this for effectively no reason. But what I did like is the adventure literally starts with like the mouth of the cairn, like the room 1. Here you are. Let's get going. So if you want to just jump into it, you just jump into it. Like there's no...
You're here.
You're here, right? Ta-da. You started at the table. We're in there. We're moving in. Okay. So I will say before we dive into the cairn itself, the adventuring party, the rival, or soon-to-be rivaling adventuring party, don't really matter if you're running this as a one-shot. If you're planning on running multiple adventures in this adventure path, then they come up again. So play up interactions, play up who they are more if you plan on continuing with the AP. Like they don't actually really matter at all if you're running this as a one-shot or you plan on doing your own thing after this. You can just sort of use them as the catalyst to get people invested in becoming adventurers, and then you can ignore them. But if you do plan on running the subsequent adventures, then yeah, they kind of matter a lot more. Okay, so the tomb. So it starts off with the false tomb, the outer part, and I guess to set the stage, you get provided with a lot of interesting information as the DM. It's a little harder as to how this information would get transferred to the players.
Yeah, or even pertain to them.
Yeah, so it's very specific unless your PCs randomly know elemental languages or have comprehend languages as a spell. There's lots of stuff that's in here that they'll miss, right? It's not just given to them. They can infer some things, right? There's glyphs that show up over and over again. They can kind of figure out linkages maybe that way, but it's not spoon-fed to them. So the tomb itself, and all the tombs, all the cairns, are literally thousands of years old. Yeah. And in the old cosmology, they're tied to the Battle of Pesh, I think it was. So this is a war that occurred between the forces of law and the forces of chaos, which used to be a big thing. In 5th edition, nobody cares anymore. But
the wars are over, man.
Millennia of conflict between planar beings used to exist because of it. So it was the Wind Dukes of Aqua and the Queen of Chaos, and they fought each other. And this is where the Rod of 7 Parts comes from, because it was used to destroy her, and then it breaks apart. And it's actually super cool. If you keep playing the AP, it comes up again. But really, it's really interesting stuff, especially if you know some of the lore from other sources. But ultimately, it's more fun for the DM than fun for the players, because there's literally no reason why
they would
dirt farmers would have any idea of where they happen to be. And I mean, that's kind of the point, is you're not supposed to appreciate the fact that you are living on a historic battlefield from millennia ago.
And it's a burial place of one of the champions of this war.
Yeah, just a fallen warrior or what have you. And that's what we're exploring. I liked the thematic stuff that was built into like this false tomb. It whispers. It's called the Whispering Cairn because like there's whispering sounds due to engineering feats, right? There's holes drilled or something like that. So you got to play that up. There's a broken portal, right? That doesn't make sense. There's glyphs everywhere. So there's lots of cool things that mostly only reward players that happen to have knowledge skills.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I mean, not a lot of adventurers do that and explicitly like reward you for investing in effectively role playing.
Yeah, I could see how like
combat skills.
Maybe especially this first part of the tomb could be a source of frustration if not sure if you weren't investigating the right things, or because the first part of the tomb is just basically a puzzle.
Well, there's wolves.
Well, okay, but like figuring out how to get to the lower part of the tomb is a puzzle.
All right. Well, I'll let you explain how that happens, but I don't want to just whatever wolves. All right. So the first part of the false tomb, the only combat there is in it is it's being used as a wolf lair. And I can't reiterate this enough, but wolves, especially in 5th edition, to first level players, are deadly. Okay, 3 wolves can cause a TPK. I'm just saying that. So I don't want to have people underestimate how dangerous.
Could be dead before you start.
I'm sorry. I just recently ran a campaign where somebody got crit by a wolf and went down from 1 hit. Right? Like they do 2d6 and they get their flanking bonus for advantage and all that type of stuff. Right. So they could be super dangerous, and adventure could end with Bill getting eaten and you having to go back and tell Bill's mom what happened to Bill. Right. Like it's potentially disastrous right from the get-go. Okay, so it's a false tomb. Why is it a false tomb? How do you find the real tomb?
Well, there's elevators that are, I guess it's sort of like a star shape. I don't know there's like a...
It's a hexagon?
Yeah, there's like a sarcophagus in the middle with a carved out statue of a guy. And his hands and different things are pointing at different symbols. And
well, the whole tomb is built on something that looks like an arrow.
Yeah, so there's... I guess through careful investigation, you might be able to find out which elevator is the right one that's working.
Well, the room itself is illuminated. It's a super cool room.
By the lanterns.
So there's these colored lanterns, some of which are missing, one of which you find in the wolf lair. So you find it right from the get-go. So the players are going to kind of figure this out. But it's I can't remember if there's 6 or however many alcoves. There's different colored lanterns.
Yes.
Some of them are missing. Ultimately, they need to find all of them and light them all to solve a puzzle, which we'll get to in a minute here. But there's a different alcoves. Each has a different colored lantern hanging from it, and that is it. What I actually liked about it is the roof is all bits of glass. So it all reflects, and you look up, and it's like the night sky. And it's
pretty.
It's a very cool room.
And there is
which is why I interrupted you.
There is like a fail-safe to this puzzle that if they don't solve it within a certain amount of time, the magic of the lanterns returns them to their original places too. That was I remember it saying that in the adventure, that if for some reason they don't have the lantern that they find with them, that if they gave it to someone in town or got put somewhere else, there's a magic that brings them back to the right spot.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the case though, right? Because the whole point is to find them. The stuff gets reset, like all the traps and stuff get reset by air elementals, I think, but I can't remember the specific details of it, because that wouldn't make sense, because there's one of the lanterns is in the flooded part, right? Like you have to go and find that whole
there was something about resetting the
lanterns.
No,
I think, I don't know if it's the lanterns, but I know the elevators get reset. So if you left it up, everything gets reset back to the beginning.
Maybe that's what it was.
So that might be it. Anyways, the adventurers may the first thing they're going to do is try to open the tomb.
Yeah.
What happens when you open the tomb?
The face trap? No, what's in the
different? So it's a trap. So the tomb, the sarcophagus is trapped. Oh, that's the other thing that does the traps all get reset.
Yeah.
As well. So you open the sarcophagus and there's some sort of burning hands trap or something like that. It's not deadly, but it will burn you badly.
It burns.
And it's empty. Right, so the player should be tipped off that maybe something isn't as it seems. Right. So it really does reward careful players. The other thing, before we start to get into the elevators, one of the alcoves has a skeleton in it. Right, and the skeleton, once again, characters that investigate this thing will notice that the skeleton has a bunch of fractured bones as if it fell from a great height, which hopefully would mean that the players will look up. No guarantees, but the character should look up. And if they do, they see that unlike in the other alcoves, the chain from this one actually comes from a hole in the ceiling, and the hole is big enough to climb through. So someone can climb up the chain and go into the hole. Do you want to talk about that now, or should we? Because that's where the face trap is. Or do you want to come back to that?
We can come back to it. Doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. So that's one of the things they can find. So I was like, actually, no, let's talk about it. It actually makes sense to talk about it now. So going up to the top of this chain, what do they find?
The face trap.
The face trap. So,
which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It does several different things. Cast hold person, cast control wind, and wind blast.
So basically, you come out of this hole in the ground, and there's a long hallway at the end of which is a carved humanoid face. Giant, like person-sized face carved into the wall. And as you move closer towards it,
traps start going off.
So worst case scenario, what happens is you get
held
and then
pushed
blown
back
to the
down.
end of the tunnel and then down the hole. And then I can't remember if it's like 60 feet or something. And then you fall, right?
So you're dying.
So level 1, you will die. Now, granted, if you don't get paralyzed, there's mechanisms in place. Like, it's not a super high saving throw DC. So, and if you say, or for the hold person at least, the wind is the wind, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't fight against the wind. Like, you're going to get blown down. But you can, you can sort of brace yourself and try to catch the chain and stuff like that. You get blown by the wind. That means that there are tip-offs in the tunnel. Like, there's scratch marks and gouge marks and stuff like that. So once again, players that are paying attention should be rewarded with the fact that, like, hey, this seems super dodgy.
Well, exactly. That's what I was saying earlier. This rewards careful, thoughtful play from the players.
Yes, exactly. So that's more for later. So basically, to get through here and to disable the traps and to get through the face, the players need to find all of the lanterns, 2 of which are missing, light them all, okay? One of which is already lit with an ever-burning torch, which is actually kind of awesome for level 1 characters who are just going to find a neat magic item right off the get-go. But that's the way. If you find all the lanterns, hang all the lanterns, and then light them all, it disables the trap, and then you can climb up there and you can proceed. And we'll get to that bit in a little bit later. So where do we find the other lantern? How do we explore the rest of the dungeon? We do that by activating the elevators. Now, this is the one thing, and I think you mentioned here, where the players may never figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, it's theoretically possible to just not understand what can happen. I believe there's some, you can do investigation checks and whatnot, but the idea is basically that the whole platform that the sarcophagus is on can rotate. And then when you point it at different alcoves, things can happen. There's 3 alcoves that if you point the arrow to, a elevator rises out of the ground.
To take you to different places.
Take you to everything. Well, 2 of them take you to 2 other places. One of them murders you in horrible ways. So there was 3 of them. Okay. So there's a broken elevator, there's a false elevator, and then there's one that actually works. Right. So I liked that the broken elevator has this delay. So, like, you have these little stone tubes come out, they're hollow. Only one character can go in them at a time. Right. So they're little coffins. So you need to have someone who's brave enough to get into it to begin with. So the broken one makes a horrible noise as it comes up. So there's this screeching and scrawling of metal on metal. So hopefully players will be like,
Probably shouldn't go down.
Seems a little dodgy. If they get in it, nothing happens for 3 rounds, and then the whole thing falls, and they are gonna die. The fall damage doesn't kill them. What's at the bottom of the elevator absolutely will kill them, and they will be by themselves. So hopefully the players shouldn't climb in there. And if one of them does, I would be generous enough, even though I would consider myself maybe a heartless DM, that I would probably say something like, when you step in the elevator, there's a horrible screech of metal and grinding of gears beneath your feet.
Please don't go in it.
And if someone says something like, oh, okay, and they stay there, then yes, they're too pure for this world. And maybe their next, character will be a little bit more,
He's just the dumb kid of the group.
Well,
He's the one that does anything. Jimmy will do it.
let him try it. He'll eat anything. So let's assuming that you have careful players, which one would hope that you do have careful players. What happens is that the elevator falls, smashes to the ground, and everyone's like, "Oh, good thing we didn't get in there." And then what happens?
Swarms?
Swarms. 2, I believe, beetle swarms come roiling out of the hole, and then some crazy little aberration thing too, just for added fun.
And you're a big fan of swarms.
I am a big fan of swarms. I'm less of a fan of 5th edition swarms because they're, the kid gloves, nerfing everything. In the edition that this was designed for, swarms were of certain sizes were completely immune to weapon damage. So in the original design of this game, so if you're running it for 3rd edition or Pathfinder for that matter, these swarms will be completely immune to weapon damage. So depending on what your party has, this is potentially a run screaming for your lives situation, or a TPK, right? Like there's plenty of accounts of people running this, and they're like, and then my whole party died, right? Because old school swarms don't have to roll to hit. I can't remember in 5th edition if they do or not. So they just move into your area. They do a bunch of damage to you. You can't hurt them back. By the time players figure out they can't do any damage, they're already dead and getting eaten. In 5th edition, I think swarms just take half damage. So while dangerous, you probably should be able to survive it. Now, granted, should you have your first real encounter kill your entire party?
Debatable.
Maybe. Shrug. But, it kind of makes sense to be a little bit more forgiving, and I get that, especially in the context of this adventure where you're not actual real adventurers. You're like, let's go look for fun.
Yeah.
And, like, why would you know about swarms and have the appropriate items or spells to deal with it?
Yeah, this is like one of the ones where I don't think I would run this for newish players. I think there's too much things that they would just get stuck on. Too much, like you're leaving too much to the player agency to ask questions and investigate and do things and figure things out. Like this isn't like a DM driven thing. It's like, here's a room, and then what's in the room. Yeah. Lots of questions to be asked and details to be given. So I feel like you'd baby people through this if they weren't experienced.
If you don't have somebody who's proactive to ask
or a leader
questions,
or a leader in the group that would do it.
Someone, or you have a bunch of leaders, right?
Yeah.
But you need at least one person that be willing to ask questions, investigate things. I mean, you could just cheat it out and let someone make an investigation roll these days if you're running it in 5th edition.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the whole reason why investigation exists, I guess, so people can just roll instead of playing the game. But
and I get that your character is supposed to have knowledge that you as a player don't have, because I mean they're wizards and stuff. But,
but I mean isn't that kind of the game though?
Well, that's
is to
what
try
I
to
mean,
figure
right?
stuff out.
Like it's a puzzle. It's a
if you just every single time a role playing encounter occurs, you're just like, I make a charisma check. Did I win the talking?
Right.
That's not really. It's not fun I can say it's not fun for everyone. Some of you might find that fun. I don't want to judge anybody, but
I'm lying. Nope.
Yeah, I tried to trick him. Roll. Did I trick him? Well, how did you trick? What do you try?
Yeah, I said some stuff.
And you're saying like, I'm the Countess of Montague. It's like, what are you wearing? My adventuring gear. He doesn't believe you. Like, but I rolled a 27. It's like, I don't care. So yeah, I mean, I'm totally okay with minimal effort, but I do expect some effort for that type of stuff.
Come to participate.
Exactly. Like. And don't feel forced to play D&D if you don't want to. It might not be your thing, and that's totally okay. But this is definitely an adventure where like everyone can't be passive.
No, you need to be doing stuff,
or you just have to make things really obvious.
But I feel like that ruins the point of this adventure.
Yeah,
I mean, most of it is spent exploring this tomb where there's not things to poke.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, as we'll see, some of the stuff here. I mean. I have run this adventure before. I ran it for a group using Pathfinder rules. And this adventure kind of is more fun if players don't have player knowledge, right? Because some of the things, lose a lot of their impact if players can't keep player knowledge away from their characters, right? Like the mold that we'll talk about.
Yeah,
right? Like if you are familiar
with molds,
with the types of dungeon things out there, or as a character that like it's a swarm, we need to run away, I didn't prepare that spell or something like that, like that's I don't say it ruins it, right? But like when your player, this is a whole other issue, this is the whole metagamey thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend a ton of time talking on it, but like if you can't keep player knowledge and character knowledge like separate, I'm not okay with that, right? I'm totally fine with a player being like, can I make a knowledge check to see how much I know about this?
Yeah,
that I think is totally fine. But I definitely run into situations where players have had difficulty keeping that divide. You know, I'm also okay with like a player being like, oh, okay, how much would my character know about this? Right? Like how much do people know about trolls in your world?
Yeah.
Like, do you need to have special knowledge to know that trolls need to have fire to stop their regeneration? Or is that just something that like people know
in the area,
because trolls are common enough, right?
Yeah.
So
one of the things that bothers me about the meta, I mean, we're not even talking about the dungeon anymore, but like, the thing that bothers me about the metagaming is not so much like my player knowledge affecting my own play, but when you're like, I touch the mold, and as a player I go, no, don't do that. And then you're like, well, wait, I don't touch the mold. Like when it starts influencing other people, I think that ruins the whole like natural aspect of the game, where it's like, yeah, sure, I may know what brown mold is. I won't make my character touch it unless like I'm really into playing a dumb character that's curious, but like don't prevent other people from making mistakes and learning too.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I completely agree with that. Especially if you're playing a character that shouldn't have any of this knowledge. Like you're like, I'm playing a, wharf rats.
Like how would any of these people even know what like brown mold is?
They
or,
shouldn't.
Like, they wouldn't even. I mean, presumably they would get into the elevator too if they were a curious person. They wouldn't like. They would have no concept of what kind of like engineering this is.
Exactly.
Right? They just be like, oh, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think the average person, if the elevator door is open and there's a grinding of metal and like, maybe a faint smell of like smoke. You're just like, no, I'll get the next one. Like something like that doesn't really bother me as much as you say, okay, a bunch of huge roiling mass of beetles comes running out, and then like your 6 intelligence barbarians like, oh, it swarms, pull out the flasks of oil. It's just like, no. Right? Like that's, and I don't think people necessarily do it on purpose all the time, but like
it's hard not to like do some of it, especially if you've played a lot. You just accumulate knowledge,
right? But like that's where you have to make the effort to not play that.
I mean, a good example of this. I mean, we've talked about the show Critical Role a couple of times, but one of the guys, Liam, on there, I've heard him when I watched it. He goes, Liam knows what this is. My character does not. And then he like voices it consciously, I think, almost to like prepare himself that like, I don't know what this is. Let's play as I wouldn't. Anyway.
But no, I mean, I have a ongoing game that I'm playing with, and I've had multiple times where different characters in the game have cast spells that they as players know don't work, right? But their characters are just like, oh no, it's fireball every single time, right? Like, so I've asked them, like, you sure you want to do? Is like, oh yeah, like so and so has no clue what the resistances are for this thing.
That's great, yeah.
And now they do. Like now they cast the fireball spell and they're like, that didn't work. Now the character has the knowledge as well. But like I appreciate that level of commitment to expend a resource on something you as the player know is a waste.
Yeah.
But the character's just like, character's never seen these things before. Why would they have any idea that this is the way it's going to work?
Great.
So I've been really impressed with some of my players when they've taken it to that level, when they've made decisions based off of what their characters would do, not necessarily what they themselves
makes the
would
game
do.
better too.
Makes their game fun. That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of role playing, is
to be fun. I think that comes with like a player maturity though too. Is that like you've done most everything, right? Like now what makes the game interesting for me? Is it the character that I'm playing, or is it actually going into the dungeon and doing the thing?
I don't necessarily want to say that it's player maturity, but it's an understanding of playing the game versus winning the game.
Right.
And what does that mean to you? And sometimes playing the game doesn't always mean winning the game.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's hard for everybody. Like I mean, the more you play, the harder it becomes, because the more player knowledge you know. Like you've just experienced this before, but your character hasn't experienced. So it's the hardest part of playing, especially if you DM on the side too. DMs like know everything, right? Like so when you might be playing an adventure that you've DM'd before, so you know where everything is. So how you have to make sure you have to take extra effort to not give that away and ruin it for everybody.
Yeah, be conscious about it.
Ruin it for everybody else, right? Anyways. That's an aside. So assuming that you don't get eaten by the aberration weird thing or the beetles, you can go down
to two different places.
There's two others. I actually literally didn't write down which one. Okay, so Lair of the Laborers. That's where the broken elevator, the one that drops leads to.
You know what? Actually, talking more about the Lair of the Laborers, the beetle. Yeah, that's where the beetle hive
is. That's where
the
beetle hive is.
But there's like a funny ha moment that the creators did in this, and you find a ring of featherfall in this area too. So it's like you may have just died from falling, but at the bottom of this is the key to your survival.
I mean, that is pretty funny. So do you want to talk about the rest of the elevators first, or do you want to go to the Lair of the Laborers?
You can just talk about the Lair of the Laborers. That's the elevator room.
Sure. Okay. So the Lair of the Laborers actually is the only place that they actually need to go to. Actually. As I say, actually.
One of the lanterns is down there.
Because this is where the last lantern that they don't have yet is. So down here, as in both of the parts that they can go to, there's nutrient sludge. So as part of the design, the people who built this built magical sludge fountains that excrete a nutritious food-like slurry, which provides you sustenance. Which I kind of appreciated this. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess so. But I mean, there's your dungeon ecology for you. So the parts that you're exploring are where the people who built all the tombs, or just this tomb, lived while they were building it. I don't really get that, as it seems to would have taken more time to build.
Yeah, like why create an extra room for you to live in? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't make any sense. Not to me, but apparently they built rooms for them to live in while they built the room to bury the guy in, instead of just building it outside, living in a tent. Whatever. I mean,
nobody knows
the Windlorns of Aqua are from a different plane of existence. Maybe they
enslaved humans to do it, or some other.
Exactly right. So who knows, right? So there's a big beetle swarm living on this slurry. So I think there's some more swarms down here. There's also some giant beetles, which big bugs. Big fan. I'm a big fan of giant insects as monsters. Bugs are creepy enough when they're small. You ramp them up to like dog or horse sized, and they're
dog bugs.
Well, a human sized spider, man. How horrible is that? Think about how terrifying. Not like a human sized Spider-Man. Spider-Man is human sized, but a spider that is human sized. That would be horrifying, man. It'd be super fast. It would be awful. So there's a bunch of stuff here. You find the remains of a failed expedition from X number of years ago. So you find some dead bodies that are all encrusted in goo and eaten by beetles. And
would a human-sized spider be super fast?
Presumably.
Aren't they only quick because of like power to weight ratios?
Entirely possible. I have no idea. Okay, there used to be like giant scorpions. So there's probably tracks from giant scorpions. So I'm sure some paleontologist has worked out the land. If anyone out there is a paleontologist that has worked out the mean land speed of ancient prehistoric insects, let me know. I'd like to know if anyone's actually done this. I assume it'd be reasonably quick. It wouldn't be slow. I mean, there's a reason why exoskeletons don't work so well after a certain size to weight ratios.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So they're big and super slow. Maybe they're less scary. Maybe there's an optimal size. Cat-sized spiders. Is it better if it's a cat-sized spider?
Sounds more dangerous.
Like a face hugger tarantula? No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, there's those giant hand-sized tarantulas, like the bird-eating ones. Those seem big enough. I don't know how fast they are. Anyways, if you're an entomologist and you know how fast...
Don't live in Australia if you're afraid of giant spiders.
Well, and they have nice beaches and sharks and alligators and all kinds of stuff. It's basically like a D&D adventure every single day, leaving your house in Australia. Everything wants to kill you.
There's this kid that I read about a little while ago. He's been bitten by a shark, attacked by a bear, and something else ridiculous. It's just like things that should never happen to one person in a lifetime has all happened to this kid by the time he's 20.
Yeah, a lot of experience.
Yeah, bit by a snake, maybe? I don't know. Anyway.
I don't know.
Lair of the Laborers. Yeah.
So there's some stuff here, like you find some information about some organizations and whatnot, but once again, like I don't get why it's in here. So you learn about the Seeker organization. There's kind of like pseudo archaeologists or what have you, but some of that ties to like the campaign world more than it ties to anything else. So unless
seeding,
unless you plan on using this organization in some other aspect of your world, I don't know that it's necessary to have that type of information. Like it's totally okay just for like, you to find the bug crawling skeleton of somebody with a bullwhip and a big, and a fedora or whatever. Yeah. It's not a fedora's hat, but you know what I mean.
Wrangler.
Yeah, you'd find Indy all chewed up if you wanted to, but it's just people have been here before, they died. Yeah. And that's really all you need to say. I did like the beds, right? So there's in multiple in the layer of the architect too, but there's the beds are air cushion beds. So if you lie on them, you float on a cushion of air. It's like it's a literal air mattress, which I thought was funny. Yeah. More than anything else. Also in one of the rooms with a giant beetle, there's a statue with a giant club. And if you sleep on the beds and you aren't a Winduke of Aqua or whatever they are,
people are,
it crushes your skulls in your sleep, right? Like it animates and just smashes skulls. Because why would you build that? Like
they really hate people that are not wind people.
Apparently, and who thought they'd sneak into like Goldilocks issues, like where they're just random people wandering in and sleeping in their beds. It makes no sense. It's hilarious, but it will just murder. It's a trap that kills your players if they randomly sleep.
At least a player.
Well, a player, yeah. Like full on, just crushed skull, game over, roll another one. There's also an underwater section in here, which I got a kick out of. So the showers got backed up, and like I believe that is the explanation. This is the shower area, and it got backed up.
Yeah,
and it's flooded. So here is the players need to go in here to find the last lantern, which they don't necessarily know explicitly, but if they wander around enough, this will probably end up being like the last place they check out. So they need to go into this underwater area, which is always problematic. Underwater combat and underwater stuff is always problematic to me. I don't really like the way it works, but it's very, very dangerous for the players. So in the underwater section, there's a water elemental, which in and of itself is more of an annoyance than anything else. It's more to delay you. But there is also a ghoul. Right? And that ghoul, if it hits you, can paralyze you.
Underwater.
So you can get paralyzed underwater. So the question then becomes, if you're holding your breath while swimming and you get paralyzed by a ghoul, do you stop holding your breath? Is it flaccid paralysis or rigid paralysis?
Or do you hold your breath infinitely?
That's what I'm saying. Like, are you paralyzed because you go all floppy, or do you get paralyzed in the fact that you get all stiff?
Well, you must get stiff, but it couldn't paralyze your diaphragm because there doesn't say anything about strangulation when you're paralyzed, right?
Yeah. So
you would have to say you'd be breathing, right?
Well, that's the whole thing. Is like you don't suffocate if you're paralyzed.
So you just have to be like, burp.
So that means you can hold your breath while paralyzed? See, this is an interesting question because, like, let's say, are you paralyzed and then someone casts like Stinking Cloud? Are you susceptible to stinging
breathe
cut?
it. You would probably breathe it, right? Because you could be paralyzed for rounds exceeding probably the amount of time you could hold your breath for.
I don't know. In D&D, you can hold your breath for like forever. Like there's some wonky rules with it.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Like, I mean, you can't swim, so obviously that's a big issue because you can't go get air. So regardless, but it's just something I'm curious is whether if you're paralyzed, because presumably you don't suffocate, but you can still hold your breath.
But you also couldn't stop water from flowing into your lungs.
What if you're paralyzed with your mouth closed?
I don't know, man.
I don't know. So this has come up before, and I don't have a satisfactory answer to it. So I don't know if there's actual rules about this interaction somewhere.
I feel like it would be like a catatonia. Like you'd just be catatonic.
Yeah, so you're like flaccid paralysis though. Like all the air rushes out of your thing, you start breathing.
No, because people in a state of in a catatonic state breathe.
Yes, I know. But like if you're catatonic, can you hold your breath? Do you lose voluntary control over your muscles? You need voluntary control over your muscles to hold your breath. Right? Like, because that's voluntary. It's not automatic. You're just switching to your automatic. Then you start breathing. I don't know. Like this is kind of like a pointless argument. Like,
I guess it depends where on the neck the paralysis starts, right? Like, does the cool hit you in like the lumbar, or the thoracic?
Yeah. No. It's an interesting thing, and it's something. If nothing else, if you're running this adventure, you need to have an answer to this question before you get to this part, because the likelihood of somebody becoming paralyzed while underwater is
moderate.
High,
yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
So
I wasn't prepared for this.
No, I don't. It happens. There's all kinds of wonky rule interactions that occur sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine the easiest way to just assume is like, yeah, you can still hold your breath, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Can you not blink? Could you you get paralyzed with your eyes open? Can you still get turned to stone by Medusa? These are the questions that keep me up at night.
Right.
Anyway, so roughly what you're going to do is you're going to go down here, you're going to kill a bunch of bugs.
Kill a
ghoul, get the lantern, and then move on.
Yeah.
And at this point, with the lantern, you can move. You can solve the puzzle if you solve the puzzle and move on from there. But there are still 2 other elevators that can be activated, and presumably, when your players discover that it can spin and an elevator pops up, they're probably going to just continue spinning to see how many there are. So which order things get done in doesn't really matter. So another elevator that pops up is a false elevator, which I just love everything about this one. So an elevator pops out of the ground. It is full of crushed bones, gemstones, and other miscellanea.
A hint.
Why would there be crushed bones and gemstones only in the elevator? If your player do not appreciate this as being a question and they're like, oh, treasure, and they just go to walk in there, they deserve everything that happens to them. So this is a trap, and basically if they step in it to loot it or what have you, the doors close, the whole thing turns into a crushing trap, and they literally, it does so much damage that there's no way they survive. So once again,
trash compactor.
It's a trash compactor. It's exactly it. There's enough warning that the player should not step into this. Mm-hmm. One would hope, but if they do,
I kind of like that about this adventure. There's like very obvious but punishable things.
Yeah. You're fully warned.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily explicitly, but like if there's a bunch of skeletal remains in something, don't get in there. Like this doesn't seem like rocket surgery. So that's the trap one, and then there's one more, and it's the only one that actually works. Mm-hmm. So you get in it, it takes you down. What I love about this one, though, is because it's the only one that works, it's the only one that players have to go down one at a time.
Yep.
Which, if they've done any of the other ones first, they're going to be super paranoid about being the first person down there. Nothing happens. Like they're not super punished by being the first person that goes down there, but I could see there being a little bit of hesitation
for sure
of not wanting to be the first person down the hole. So this is the layer of the architect. So they come here. They're in a room that's blocked off because a trap had been triggered historically.
Yep.
I think they can squeeze over top of it, like a big block fell, and you can
crushing
bypass
trap.
it.
Yep.
Basically, if you some deck saves and you can swiggle past it. There's a super random monster in here.
The lurking strangler.
The lurking strangler.
Super gross.
It's like a digestive system that's been animated and like strangles people.
It's pretty cool though.
It's cool. I can't remember why it's there for. Is it Filge sent it?
Not sure.
Remember some other random NPC sent it for random reasons that your players are never going to find out.
Yeah.
But there's an answer there for the DMs if you are like, why is this weird thing here? Because, like, how did it get in there? How did it get...
Don't ask these questions, we've found out.
Yeah, sometimes it's better just to say, hey, there's a gross, weird, undead thing, which you can completely cut, and it won't damage anything.
There's a poison trap down here.
There's more nutrient sludge that's not full of, like, beetle maggots.
And there's brown mold.
Now, see, this brown mold... This is one of those situations that's beautiful if your players don't know what it is, and... It's fine if they do know what it is.
Well, if they touch it, they could maybe die in one hit.
Well, if you get there, it makes the room cold. Yeah. As you get closer to it, you get colder and colder and colder. You would assume that, like, maybe I shouldn't touch the super freezing thing.
But the best part about brown mold is if you try to burn it.
Well, the brown mold isn't extruding cold; it's absorbing heat. As what works in physics. It's actually true, right? Things get cold because they're losing heat, right? But in people's minds, oh, it's cold, let's kill it with fire.
And it doubles in size.
So if someone, say, tries to burn it with fire and throw a torch on it or something, it doubles in size. They could see themselves getting caught in it and take a ton of frost damage. Once again,
like if they throw like an oil lantern at it, everyone should just die.
Oh, it should just be a game over. And then you can just scrape it away, or you can use cold spells to eliminate it, of which there's cantrips, so it's not super huge issue. But once again, this is one of those situations where it plays on party expectations. You know, like that you would think that something's cold, you should get rid of it with heat. Then again, I mean, if someone makes an appropriate knowledge check, which I wouldn't even know what that would be in 5th edition. Nature, I guess. Not that it's
maybe.
Anyway, nature.
They might be able to find out what it is. Nothing exciting in this room otherwise, though. There's magic item.
There's a earth elemental.
Oh.
Right. There's a little elemental that's shaped like an egg. And when you touch it, it hatches into an elemental. And
a captured elemental.
A captured earth elemental who can tell you everything about this place if you can speak to it. If you speak Terran, this is amazing. If you don't speak, or whatever the equivalent in 5th edition, if you don't speak the earth elemental tongue, it attacks you and it's just another random fight. So there's a few other random cool art pieces down here. Like you find some neat stuff. I believe there's also you get the goggles of minute seeing, which are neat magic items. So there's some cool stuff in here, but it's mostly just for interest's sake and some treasure than anything else.
Yeah.
And if they bypass the brown mold, then there's nothing really dangerous here. Okay, so they clear everything.
They've got all the lanterns.
Hopefully they understand that they're supposed to hang them. If they light them all, the wind trap gets disabled. They climb up the chain. They find that the mouth on the giant head has opened, and they can see the path through it,
which is just another hallway.
Not just a hallway. I think it's directly into the bouncing the ball pit, if you will. So there's a narrow ledge that leads from the mouth to a locked, crazily like mechanical vault door, if you will. And the path is suspended above a ball pit full of iron balls
with a crushed body in the bottom,
which you don't know, but there's a bunch of holes in the wall opposite you, and if you start walking across the balance beam, iron balls start getting shot at you to try to knock you off. They hurt. You will fall into the ball pit, and there's a Grick in here because why not?
Whatever.
I think I cut the Grick completely when I did this, just because it doesn't actually serve any purpose. What I do like about this and the way I did it is when my players got knocked off, I had laughter start coming. That's how I introduced the ghost.
Well, it says
to
to
them.
introduce the ghost by goading.
Yeah. So laughing, making fun of them,
Yeah.
and then manifest themselves. There's a ghost here.
Yeah. Who is the ghost of the kid who
Alistair Land.
was murdered, and
He didn't murder. He made it this far.
murdered by the balls.
He was killed by the ball. The trap killed him. So I guess he shouldn't be laughing at anybody because he
No.
got one in like the temple, and then
Yeah, he got smushed. His neck is all broken.
Yeah.
He's got long, gross fingernails. And essentially, there's a little bit of RP. You can choose to fight him. He'll fight back or try to possess someone. Eventually, he just wants you to put his bones to rest.
yeah, unless your players are super antagonistic, there's no reason that they should get into a fight
And this is sort of where the exploration of this dungeon ends
for the moment.
for the moment.
Yeah.
So you talk to this kid. He asks you to put his bones to rest.
He trades you. Basically, the players
key.
have no way to open up the door.
He
So-
can travel through the door
Yeah.
and disable it from the inside.
Exactly. So he'll unlock the door from the inside if you return his bones.
Yeah.
His farm is nearby, so this shouldn't be a major issue for the players. And at this point, they might be looking to rest anyways.
Yep.
Do you want to just finish the tomb here, and then, or do you want to come back to it at the end?
I guess we can just finish it off. I mean, so
Yeah.
if you go put the bones to rest, you get access to the tomb, which is the true tomb.
Yeah.
And there's just a small combat encounter, which is two of the
So there's two. They're called Wind Warriors.
Yeah.
They're basically unique air elemental guardians, and they're tough.
they both have 36 hit points, and
They fly.
yeah, they'll murder.
They can fly. They have a ranged attack. The room itself is mostly empty space.
Yep.
Right. It's suspended. Like the players can get knocked off. They're not going to die, but there's not a lot of ground to work on. So it's easy for the Wind Warriors to have high mobility because they can fly over stuff. They have very powerful melee attacks. So, and they have ranged attacks too. So if you just try to hide and pew pew, then they're just going to pew pew you back. And if you try to fight them in melee, they're super, super tough. So it's a very challenging fight to end things off. And then you get treasure if you beat them. So you find some cool things, and that's basically it, which you then can get the local sage to identify for you, and you can get some cool stuff in there and some money and what have you, which then can lead into they end up being parts of plot hooks that lead you to the future. So if you're running this as a one shot, you can literally put anything you want in there, your own MacGuffin to move on to the next stuff. So that's how the tomb ends. But to get to the tomb, we got to lay the bones to rest. It turns out that's harder. It's easier said than done. That's the right thing. Yeah. So you take the bones to the land farmstead, which the players can do a knowledge check to see if they know already, or they can ask around town. And they get there, and what do they find?
It's abandoned and inhabited by owl bears.
Owl bears, because they're cool.
Why not? Yeah, there's two mated pair of owl bears that have resided in this place, and
One of them's dead.
yeah, and there's a baby owl bear. So if you choose to murder this fanatic owl bear, and you can get a little owl bear baby,
Which you can raise or sell for like tons of cash.
but they're unruly. So keeping it would be like fun for a little bit, and it'd probably just become too much of a pain in the neck or so it says. But yeah, you could have a little companion that you could try and raise if you want.
And the family plots
Are empty.
have been dug up.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious that the tombs have been defiled. Right? They've all been dug up, and there's wheelbarrow marks, there's foot marks, and that's what leads you to their homestead. You see a bunch of feet going out into it, and there's fewer feet coming out of it. So that's where you fight the owl bears, and if you investigate there, you find the severed arm, which is all that remains of an Eton tomb robber that has a tattoo.
Yeah.
And once again, locals will recognize the tattoo as being...
It'll link you to the feral dog. And
yeah,
it's part of a little.
it's a plot hook that leads you to one of the taverns in town.
Feral doge.
The feral dog, called that because you can bet on dog fights, because
Feral
It's
doges.
that type of play. It's full of doges. And you can find, well, it's pretty easy once you get there to find the people that are all bandaged and bloody from their interaction with the
Yeah. You can either choose
owl
to
bear.
beat these people up or bribe them or try and convince them some other way to give you the information that you're
Yeah,
looking
so
for.
however you get the information out of them, you'll find out that they were hired to deliver corpses to a guy who's situated in an abandoned observatory outside of town. So it links you there. And once again, these are characters that tie into the greater overplot of the adventure path. So this interaction is more about extending links between the different NPCs that you'll be dealing with. Is there anything else I wanted to add there? Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is one of the 3 adventurers that are blah 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 who started the whole thing hangs out here. So in the time we ran this, my players ended up like boasting to them, and when they tried to go at the end of the adventure, my players tried to go and loot the final thing, the 3 other adventurers were following them, so they had to lose the other 3 adventurers to not have it stolen. So
Smart.
So that's it's one of the things I did is if your players end up being boastful, everybody's going to want a piece of this action. So
And it is a seedy town.
it is a seedy town of desperate people. Okay, so we get to the old observatory, which I actually like as a location. I think even as a standalone, it's kind of fun.
It's a cool theme. Lots of undead. There's the my favorite part of the whole thing is like the security system, the head on the table.
Oh, the goblin.
Yeah, you get near the head and it starts yelling that there's intruders in this place. And
yeah, there's a
animated head.
What was it? Yeah, it's a mummified goblin dressed in like a top hat and spectacles, holding a serving tray with a severed head on top of it, with like I don't know, gold coins on the eyes or something like that. You touch any of it, and the
intruders.
The head starts screaming intruders, which is awesome. My favorite part actually is the feast room. So you go into the dining room, and there's a table. At each spot at the table is a zombie seated there. The zombies will not attack you. They will not do anything. And the only spot that's empty is the head of the table. And if you sit at the head of the table, the zombies animate and pretend to eat, and then like start complimenting Filge, who's the necromancer here, be like, "Oh, Filge, how come I can't believe I never dated you in wizard school." Like it's literally the zombies start like complimenting.
It's a cool like egotistical.
Oh, it's super sad and creepy. Is what it is. But there's a bunch of animated stuff.
And then it ends in an encounter with Filge, the necromancer.
Yeah. Before we get to the Filge fight, which I like a lot, I just want to mention that there are a bunch of plot letters that you
find letters.
You find letters that explain things, and you find out who this guy is working for. And once again, it's mostly linking stuff to the over meta plot of this. So like you find your first worm from the Age of Worms. This is the Age of Worms adventure path. So like there's some of that stuff in there too, which you can just cut completely if you want to run this as a standalone. So then leads to the pinnacle. You go into the observatory top. The telescope's been removed, but now it's being used as an operating theater. And Filge is doing his necromantic experiments here. Here's where we find the animated skeletons of the Land family. And a bunch of other cool things. He's got a bunch of like super zombies in tanks.
Yep. And
So
they'll break out.
they smash out of the tanks and like rip off metal bands to use as like great clubs, and they come after you.
Cool. He'll inject himself with his different, tinctures or whatever he's got.
So it's thematically, I mean, he's a wizard, but thematically he's
it's like an alchemist,
right? So all of his potions are injectable. So he's got like syringes full of goo that he injects. They're just like standard potions. Like there's nothing crazy about the effects they give, but like that's how he gives himself his potions is by injecting them. It's super cool. The only thing I would say about this part is he really should surrender, right?
Yeah, probably.
There's no reason why he wouldn't.
Like he seems like everything you get. He's like a wimpy dude.
He's a wimpy dude. He was hired by actually an important person in town to do this research. And he hasn't actually broken any laws.
Right.
So unless you're running this in a campaign world where like necromancy is illegal, yeah. I mean, it's actually kind of funny. When I didn't run the whole AP, but we ran like maybe the first half of it. The end of this adventure and the next adventure started with the players all getting arrested and accused of murdering Filge.
That's nice.
Because they let him go.
Yeah.
And he just left town. But then the guy he's working for basically accuses them all of murdering him.
Smart.
And then what ends up happening is they ended up having to work off their damages, so they ended up working for this guy, and then that led into the second adventure, and they had to do all this type of stuff for him. Because in the second adventure, they end up working for him anyways, but that's how I kind of forced it. It was pretty fun way to. My players hated it so much because they knew he was such a dirtbag, and like they had to do this because they had no proof, right?
Well,
like
that's right, yeah.
So all the evidence just suggested that they went in and murdered all of this, murdered this guy. So it was pretty fun. Yeah. So, final thoughts. What any last comments? I have a couple of wrap up thoughts.
Yeah, it's solid. I think it's solid. There's, it's like two pieces of a whole, really. Like you get a good kind of non-classic dungeon crawl, I guess. Puzzle driven, which is neat and will appeal to some people. And then the latter half is more kind of combat oriented and. I think there's cool themes throughout this whole thing, which is you don't find too much of.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say I think the dungeon and to a lesser extent the observatory are the best parts.
Yeah. And
unless you are planning on running this as the full adventure path, some of the stuff I think you could cut fairly easily.
Sure. Yeah.
Or I think you could actually cut the ghost and everything beyond that if you wanted to. And even if you didn't want to cut the ghost, I would probably cut the feral dog and the owl bears. What I would do just to streamline things and remove some of it, once again, if this is just going to be some random part of a greater whole, unless you really care about the feral dog and those NPCs, I would easily just have the trail instead of. It should just lead you to the observatory directly.
Sure, the wheelbarrow tracks.
Or whatever, or like a zombie was carrying it, so there's all these shuffle marks. There's. I think you could just do that and streamline it a little bit because some of the things in here are just to
set
the stage for the following adventure and the greater adventure path as a whole. Overall, though, I definitely like it. It's a great first level adventure. I could see it being difficult if it was your first D&D adventure ever because
lots of fatalities.
There's some punishing things. There's some places where you could make some novice mistakes and die for it, and that might be a little harsh for new players.
Yeah,
but I like it. I've run it. It's fun. I think that's everything I want to say about this at this moment.
I think so too. Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, catch you next time.